Why and how do I share so much content on so many different channels? Today, I'm going to answer your question that I got about this and share all of the pieces of my own marketing plan. Welcome to Explore Your Enthusiasm, episode 169 with me, Tara Swiger. In our last Q&A episode, I got a really big question that I thought deserved its own episode and that I would go into details with on its own. So today I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to tell you exactly what tools I use to share my work with the world, in other words, my marketing plan, how they all work together so I'm not spending all day creating content, and why I do what I do, and what my intention is behind everything that I do. So the exact question I got was from Christiane. She's from Book Midwifery. And I'll link it up in the show notes as well. She says, "Thanks so much for your podcast. It's one of my favorites these days." Well, thanks. My question has to do with the many online and social platforms you use to share content and connect with your people: blog, email list, podcast, Instagram photos, Instagram stories, YouTube, Facebook page, Facebook Live, Twitter, etc. Would you be up for sharing all the different outlets you use today and how you specifically use each one? Part of this question is pure curiosity. You're one of the most prolific content producers I know. Well, thanks. And I'm amazed at how many online tools and platforms you use to reach people. So what does it all encompass ultimately, and what is your intention for each one? The other aspect of the question is connected to my own business planning. I recently pared back from Facebook to focus solely on Instagram, which I've been loving. Now I'm starting to consider adding Facebook back in the mix, but I want to be intentional about it. I am also getting prepped to relaunch my blog and my newsletter with an aim towards building my list. So I want all these things to work together and yet offer their own unique value, which is one reason I'd love to hear how you regard each of the tools you use and allow them to work together while remaining unique to their purpose. She says, "I know you've talked about on the podcast before about creating a marketing system where all the outlets support your plan and each other, but I don't recall how recent your last take on this, and I would love to hear your current thoughts. Thank you so much for considering our questions." Okay, Christiane, that's a huge question and it has a huge answer. So before we get into it, before I even share what I'm doing, I want to offer the caveat that you likely, not just Christiane, but everybody listening, you likely have a different business model than I do. So I have an education and mentoring business with only a small part of it based on products which are related to my education on mindset, confidence, effectively sharing your work, and profitability. So like I said last week, my mission is financial independence and time freedom for women. So that is what I'm doing, and that's what I want to reflect everywhere. So everything in my business needs to reflect that: confidence, mindset, profitability, effective marketing, plus creating more financial independence. So from what products I sell, to the classes I teach, to what organizations I partner with, to what social media I use, and the messages that I post there, it all has to be integrated into that mission. So that caveat is that yours is likely different. You likely have a different business model, you likely focus on different kinds of products, and you definitely have a different mission. So as I go through my tools, I want you to ask yourself, what is your mission? What is your work about beyond just the product? If you can share that, what it's about beyond the product in everything you do, you're going to find your marketing is so much more effective. So like, you don't just sell yoga classes, you are about creating flexibility or self-care or time to yourself. So that's an example of it being about more than just the product. Now, my overall intention with everything I share is for all of it to spread my message in the marketing. So if my products were about building confidence and having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, my marketing needs to spread that message as well. It needs to encourage people to have confidence, not to make them feel crappy about themselves, which is another way to do marketing, right? To be like, really poke on your pain point, make you really feel in pain and agony and horrible. But so I don't do anything that's not in alignment with instilling confidence and self-trust and empowering women to make their own decisions and build their own business. So I do all my marketing is really about giving people a sample of what I sell. I sell classes and books, so my main content is an example of my voice for classes and books. Now, though, the distinction is that, because a lot of people ask me about this, how do you distinguish between what you teach in a class and what you put on the podcast? And the distinction is that the podcast is general theory and philosophy, whereas the classes and books are aimed at helping you actually do the work on your marketing, your profit, your confidence, etc. So I give philosophy in the for free, and application in paid. So you can take all of the philosophy I share on the podcast, on iTunes, on Facebook, and I said iTunes, I meant Instagram. You can take the philosophy I share in all the places and apply it to yourself. And if you actually do the applying to yourself, you're awesome. You got the thing from it I wanted you to get from it, which is awesome. But what most people find is they actually need some more help and practical application to apply it to themselves, along with accountability and the chance to answer the questions and all of that. So that's what my classes sell. My classes and books are the application to you. So it might seem like I do a lot of free stuff, but everything I do is interrelated. I'm not creating totally new content for every single platform, and I'll tell you why I'm okay with not. I'll explain that as we talk about this. And everything I do feeds into each other. So everything inspires everything else. So I'm not generating a totally new idea 4 times a day. I'm taking, in general, 1 new idea a week, or 1 distinction on an idea, or 1 deep dive into an idea, and then sharing that across all the places. Now we're going to get into the tools now, okay? So the heart of everything is the podcast, which is what you're either hearing or watching right now. So my podcast, both in audio and video form, lives on my blog, and it's emailed to my list. That's really just one piece of content available in several formats. It's PDF transcript, and this is actually the first step of content creation. I sit down and write out what I want to say, and then we turn this into a PDF and we attach it to each podcast episode. If you didn't know that this was part of it and you've never gotten a transcript, I highly recommend you go to any podcast episode that you like and download that transcript. Often there's also a worksheet involved. So this transcript is going to be at taraswiger.com/podcast169. When you scroll to the bottom of that, there'll be links to everything I mentioned, and then how to listen to the podcast. And then there's a form. You put your email in that form, you get the transcript emailed to you. So that's the first format that this one piece of content is in. The second is audio. Now, I create the podcast in audio form because that's my favorite way to learn with teachers. If I'm not going to sit down and read a big book, I like the audio podcast. You can do it while you walk the dogs, while you wash the dishes, while you actually make your craft, since many of you are makers. And I like it because it's so untapped, because not a lot of people are doing it. So I'm going to talk more about why I think you should have an audio podcast in an upcoming class with Creative Live. It comes out in October, so mark your calendars. I'll be sure to tell you more about it. But I really talk more about audio in that class. But that is like the second format that this same one piece of content is in. The third is YouTube. So I'm already sitting here recording the podcast in audio, so why not just also record it in video? Now, I want you to know, I fought this for a good 6 months. I didn't start doing the video, I think, until I was 1.5 years, 2 years into the podcast. And it's actually Jolie Kelly, who is now my video editor, that convinced me to just try it. So I started by just periscoping my audio recordings. So I would sit at my computer wearing whatever I normally wear when I did my audio recording, and I would set up my phone and periscope while I was recording the audio. But people liked it so much and they wanted to have more access to it that I started uploading those to YouTube. Then I realized you get better quality video if I record the audio and the video at the same time and just split them out. So while I do stream it to my Starship Facebook group, and I sometimes stream it on Instagram, I'm actually recording the version that goes on YouTube and that will live on my website. I record that in QuickTime while it and the audio are recorded at the same time. So that's another format that the same content creation is going into. It's recorded in audio and video at the same time. The audio goes to my audio editor software, which sends it to iTunes and RSS, and then the video is edited and goes on YouTube. Now, the next way it's delivered is a blog post, because not all of you use a podcast catcher, like the podcast app on your iPhone, or there's a bunch of Android podcast catchers. I use Downcast. And when I started this 3 years ago, even fewer people knew how to listen to audio podcasts. And not all of you go to YouTube, or you don't want to watch the video, you just want to listen. And by the way, if you've never seen the video before, it's just me sitting and talking to camera. So you don't need to watch the video unless you just want to see me flail my arms around. And so not everybody watches YouTube or listens to audio podcasts, so I put both formats on my blog. This also lets me have an archive all in one spot, so it's very easy to search. I can find any episode by searching my own site, tarswiger.com. The blog posts are really just everything that I've already mentioned in one place. The only thing really new it has is the links to everything I mentioned, and then we use these blog posts also as the show notes that show up in iTunes. When you're listening, however you're listening to the audio podcast, the link should show up there. So the blog post is the audio file, the video file, the links to everything I mentioned, and then a sign up form for the transcript. So you can see it's not anything different I'm creating, it's just gathering all those 3 different things in one place. And then the last step is an email. So I send the podcast episode in a weekly email, almost every week, and it's super similar to what's on the blog. But because not everybody's going to remember to go to the blog or even want to go to the blog, I send it to them. It goes to them via email, and that's just an easier way to get it. From there, they can click through and listen to the audio. They can click over and watch the YouTube, and I give them the transcript. So if you go and you sign up to get a transcript, you'll get an email with future blog posts or future podcast episodes, and you'll just get the link to the transcript so you don't have to keep signing up every week. So those 5 platforms are really just one piece of content. I write it, I record it, and then I share it in those places. And I want to stop here a minute and talk about email. So I used to write totally new lessons for the weekly emails, and you only got them when you subscribed to the emails. They were totally different than what was on the podcast or anything else. But this year in my annual survey, I asked you what you wanted me to send via email, and overwhelmingly people said, I want to get every video and podcast episode you do. And that's what they want. They want announcements of classes, of course, and they want to know when I'm doing live events, but they really just wanted to make sure they weren't missing a podcast episode. But I really resisted because I thought these emails should be different and unique. They shouldn't be something you can get if you go to the blog. But most of my subscribers signed up to get a specific podcast transcript or worksheet. So what do they want to know about? They want to know about the new podcast episodes. They want to know more of what initially brought them in. So it's my job to send them or you what you really want. And this is really, really important to keep in mind. Everyone uses different methods to consume content or to listen or to watch or to enjoy content. Some of you found me on YouTube and you have no idea I even have a website or do transcripts. Some probably only ever listen every 3 months and then you go back and you binge on them. And some people are like totally in love with iTunes and that's the only way, and they never go to my website. They just listen to me via iTunes, and then they'll email me randomly one day and be like, oh, I went to the site for the first time after listening for 2 years. You may see it in your podcast feed, but not even listen to the podcast until I send you an email and then remember, oh, I do want to hear that. Some people just get the emails with the transcripts and read the transcripts. They don't listen or watch. Maybe you see a tweet or a Facebook post. So that's the thing. That's the reason why I don't worry about having different content in every spot, because when you do that, and I've done that in the past, people get overwhelmed with how much you're creating and they just want to make sure they're not missing your best stuff. So I do create new stuff on Instagram and Facebook, but the hub that everything revolves around is the podcast, and the podcast is delivered in those different formats. That makes it seem like I'm everywhere all the time. So the podcast is the center of the hub, and out from it comes spokes. These are the platforms where I both share what's on the podcast and where people find me and come back to the podcast. Okay, so it's a sharing method, but it's also a discovery and hooking method to get them into my world, be listening to the podcast. These spokes are Instagram, both the main feed and stories. I just think of them as Instagram, and the Facebook page. You can find the Facebook page at facebook.com/Tara Swiger page. And I also do lives on that page occasionally, and then there's Twitter. So Christiane asked how I use each one and what my intention is for each one. So let me start with intention because it's the same for everything. So like with a podcast, my intention is to spread my mission with the content and to help people find the other resources I offer. So the actual things I have to post have to be in alignment with what I'm doing in the world. They can't be like, buy now or else you'll die, right? So even when I'm doing something like a big launch of the Starship, which is how most of my money for the year is made, and also the program that I spend the most time and energy working on day in and day out. Even when I'm in the middle of doing that, the messages have to be in alignment with, you can make your own business decisions. You can build your confidence. You can trust yourself. You can get profitable. You can do this. So that's my first intention with everything that I share. And then also I want them to help find the other resources I offer, which have way more detail. You can only teach and encourage so much in an Instagram post, but if you join my community and we have a weekly check-in, I can do a lot more of serving you in those ways. So I want to help them find the podcast, the classes, and the books. And my intention for all of it is that it serves you where you are. And when you want the next step, I want to make it really easy for you to find the next step. So if I do this podcast episode and never mention that I have books, but you really need a book to help you break your goal down into a plan, you're going to be annoyed if you find out later I have Map Your Business and you've been searching all over for a book to help you do that. Right? So it's my job to make sure that I move you from Instagram, Facebook, Twitter to the podcast, and from the podcast to the products when you're ready to go deeper. So the posts on a platform have to both be in service to you, my people I'm here to serve, and they need to move you to the next step when you're ready for the next step and you want the next step. Because remember, my goal is education. So I can't just sell education. I have to educate as I go. Okay. Now let's talk about how I use each one. So Instagram. I think of Instagram, my Instagram feed, like when you go to my Instagram profile, which is Tara Swiger, and you see the photos, or when you're just on Instagram and my photos pop up, I think of Instagram as being longer, encouraging bits with edited pretty pictures. So I want my Instagram feed to be a way to kind of collect and remember beautiful moments in my own life. I love to flip through my old Instagram photos. And then I make the captions give you something small throughout the day to cheer you up or brighten your day or ask a question or get you thinking about, like my post today was about reviewing your month for the month of August. So I'll do remember to review your month, remember that you can do this. Here's a lesson I just learned, just encouraging bits throughout the day. Kind of like a much tinier version of the podcast. Now, Instagram stories, that's, if you don't know, when you go to Instagram, just your homepage, at the top, there are the little circles. If they have a rainbow around them, that means that somebody has a story. If you click on it, you will see the snippets of things they've posted throughout the day all stitched together to look like one little video. And they can be photos or videos. If you go to Instagram.com/Tara Swiger, or you are in Instagram on your phone and you search Tara Swiger and you see my profile page, around my face at the top will be a little rainbow. If you click on that, you'll see my story. Okay, so Instagram stories is a real life, real-time look at what my day is actually like. So I don't really aim it at teaching or encouraging, except that I've found, and you guys have told me, that when you see how someone else is structuring their day or what books they're reading or how they're living their life or how they're dealing with rejections, it's encouraging in a just watching it happen for real for someone else kind of way. So I am not specifically trying to teach lessons in every Instagram story, although sometimes I get really, preachy on there. It lets me do mini sermons throughout the day. It also just helps people see what life as a full-time entrepreneur is really like, or what books I'm reading, or how I'm scheduling my day. Now, the next thing is Facebook page and Twitter. Right now, these are mostly just distribution channels for me. So I distribute my podcast and blog posts and Instagram posts, which I spend a lot more time crafting. I distribute them on Facebook because that's where people are. So I don't create a lot of new content for Facebook or Twitter because in my experience, people are following that in order to learn what else I'm doing. So I just tell them what else I'm doing. And actually a huge portion of my traffic to my website comes from Facebook and Twitter, so it's working. And I will also answer any questions that are asked there and have any conversations that come up, but I'm not showing up there starting conversations in the way I am on Instagram. And this is not like what I recommend. I recommend you find the place you're going to have the best community and the best conversations and focus there, and you can just use the other places as distribution channels. So I've been on Twitter since 2007. It is the thing that helped me quit my day job, not just because I was making sales there, but because I found an encouraging community of people who kept me going. So Kim Worker and Shannon Oki and Javi Brooks, those were the first friends I made online that were real friends that cheered me all the way through quitting my day job in 2009. So Twitter has a special place in my heart. But if I was starting today, I don't think I'd spend my time and energy on Facebook. Or rather on Twitter. I don't think I would really worry with it. I might go in and claim my name and then just set it up so that my blog post there. As it is, I like to go in and have conversations with my friends who I've been talking to for years on it. Now, Facebook Live. So I mostly do lives within my closed community groups. I have a Starship community group and I have an Essential Oils user group, for my customers in my doTERRA business. So I do lives there in those two groups because they're for paying customers way more often. But if I do one for my Facebook page, which anybody can follow at facebook.com/Tara Swiger page, it's because I want to share a lesson right there in the moment. And I do YouTube Live very similar. I often just use it as a way to do a live recording and get some feedback while I record. Because if I go live in Facebook, there are actually people watching. And if I go live on YouTube Live, there are a couple people watching and I can actually get feedback on something. So when I have a little lesson or a little thing I want to share or something that is like going to be longer than a 1 minute on Instagram stories, I'll go live on Facebook or live on YouTube and share it there. So it's a lot more casual. So my videos there are not edited. They're super casual. Because I found that I've had a lot that I could teach on, but it doesn't all need a long recorded podcast like this one. So now those are all the tools I use. When I talk about it like that, it seems like a lot, but I promise in my day-to-day life, it really doesn't feel like it at all. I do the podcast once a week. I do all of the work. I do the writing on Monday. I usually do the recording on Tuesday, and then it's just edited, posted, and distributed. So that's not tons of work or tons of hours. And then I am showing up on Instagram every day, posting a photo, answering people's comments, and I'm on Instagram Live every couple hours. But remember, Instagram Live is like 15-second videos or just a photo. So when I say I'm on it every couple hours, it's like 15 seconds every 2 or 3 hours. So now one last way I want you to think about all this is a path. I'm not just trying to be on every tool there is. I'm looking to use tools that will help you move down the path to the best resources. And when I say you, I mean the people I'm here to serve. So I want you to find the thing you best need now. And so I make all of this a path to lead you from one thing to the next so that you can find what you need. And I'm always adjusting my path, but right now it works like this. Instagram, people find me on Instagram because of hashtags or because my Instagram stories or my Instagram lives. And then YouTube, people find me, and occasionally people find me on Facebook and Twitter. But basically, Instagram and YouTube are people finding me, and then they follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, and that leads them to my podcast in all of its forms, including the transcript, the audio, the video, and my website. And then from there, the podcast to the website, then there's the email list. So if you want to get a transcript or a worksheet or an e-course or a webinar, you sign up. And then you dive deeper into one particular topic with that worksheet or webinar or e-course. And then that leads you to the right class or book for you. Now, sometimes I think people listen to the podcast or they follow me on Instagram, they go to my website, they just immediately buy a book. But most of my biggest sales come from people who have either found the podcast or found my social media, then they follow me for a while on both, then they go to my website, sign up for an email, do an e-course or two, do a webinar or two, and then buy one of the bigger classes or the Starship. So my goal at each step is to help you figure out if you need the next step and to help you move there while giving you great information wherever you are. And for a lot of people, the podcast will be all you need because you will just apply it, or it will just come to you at the right time and you will just use it, and you don't need to follow it up and get more specific and more applicable with a class or a book, and that's fine. That's actually why I created the Patreon, because so many people emailed me and said, I listen to your podcast, I don't need the classes, but I want to support what you're doing. So I created the Patreon. It's patreon.com/TaraSwiger. For as little as $1, you can support the podcast. I don't worry about it or promote it a lot because I just let people know, if you love the podcast and don't want or ever need the class or books, you can support its ongoing mission there. So my intention for all of this is that it serves you where you are. And if you need the next step, I want to make it easy for you to find. And if you don't need a class or a book and you just want the ongoing encouragement, then the podcast email is where your path stops and you'll still be well served. I try to make sure that if all you ever do is listen to the podcast and the email, I'm still serving you. And if you don't need the podcast or a weekly email in your inbox, the Instagram and stories, if that's where you stop, that's going to serve you in tinier bits of encouragement and a real life view of what it's like to build a business. So that's everything. That's how I think about it. That's how it works together. It's a hub and spoke. It's a path. It's really just a couple pieces of content shared and distributed in different ways. If you have a follow-up question or you want me to go even into more detail on any of this, just let me know. I really want you, though, to think about your own social media and not try to do what other people are doing or what you see me doing, because I have a different business. Do what's going to work for you and your audience and serve them best at each step. So I'd love to see what you do. So please post a photo on Instagram. Use the hashtag #ExploreYourEnthusiasm so that I can see what you're doing, because I just love seeing it and I'll encourage you and cheer you on. So thank you so much for asking your questions, and thank you for listening. I wish you an enthusiastic day.